I grew up in Spokane, Washington, self-declared heart of the Inland Empire. It was a very interesting time. I was a very young kid in the 50s, and my dad took over the family business from his dad, which was a Ford dealership. So depending on your point of view, it was Honest Ernie or Dirty Ernie Majer Ford. Right? And so, we grew up with everything Ford. Henry Ford, we had pictures of him up on the building, blah, 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 blah. And mine was a pretty, I don't know how to explain it. It was like a little Leave It to Beaver kind of, growing up, a nice little urban neighborhood with yards and families and kids playing in the streets and, all that kind of stuff. And it was all seemingly perfectly normal.
Well, now they call that Pleasantville.
Yeah, well, fine. I grew up in Pleasantville.
Okay.
Yeah. Also known as the South Hill in Spokane, right? If you're on the north side, we were the cake eaters, right? So
Okay.
I never did get that. So anyway, nothing much to tell. I was a Cub Scout. I got kicked out of the Boy Scouts. Apparently, you're not supposed to put honey in people's sleeping bags. And, nothing really exciting to tell other than when I was a young kid, my dad's definition of daycare was, he'd leave me with the used car salesman for hours on end. So my early days were shaped with used car salesmen.
So you kind of learned how to hustle.
A little bit of an insight into my mindset, right? So, but when I got to high school, now things in society were starting to change, okay? When I think it was in junior high, I don't remember, but the Beatles, rock and roll showed up in a whole different way. And we, as I try to explain to people today, if you weren't there, you missed it, but it was not the 60s that were the big breakout. It was like 65 to 75, right? There's this decade-long battle of the bands, social upheaval, all this stuff happened in a short period of time. And for us, little, kids from Spokane, Washington, it was pretty astonishing. And the real thing that I think began to change everything for me was the war in Vietnam. Okay, because now all of a sudden the government hadn't quite figured out how to handle the media, because in World War II they were partners. Yeah. So reporters and film crews would go and they'd make these little essentially propaganda movies. Well, now the war in Vietnam was not popular, and these guys could report on anything they wanted to because they didn't have to necessarily have escorts and permission except out on the front line. So they're in Saigon, they're in all the Hue's and all the other different cities, and we're getting live reports on the nightly news, things. And the thing that stood out to me that kind of woke everybody up was one night there was this scene of the news, and the reporters talking about how these guys just captured this Viet Cong guy and they weren't sure what to do with him, and then suddenly somebody walks up, puts a gun to this guy's head, and blows his brains out on the 6 o'clock news.
You actually could see this?
Yes.
Oh wow, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, so we're sitting there eating dinner going,
yeah,
wow, and totally changed the national discourse about things. Well, it was also a great example of not intentional but kind of manipulation, the way that the media portrays things.
Sure.
This was just kind of a random occurrence. Nobody knew what the heck was going on, but it was quickly jumped on by all the anti-war people as proof of this terrible, this horrible, this thing. Well, eventually the backstory came out that the guy that they captured had murdered a family, a wife and kids of a South Vietnamese army officer. And the guy who ran up and shot him was that officer.
Oh, man.
Right? He hadn't been home. He'd come home just after this had happened. And, he saw this guy that the cops had grabbed and so forth. And, everybody told him 2 and 2, and that's 4 right there. So he just, in a fit of understandable fury, rage, and whatnot, came and shot this guy.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're kind of going, well, wait a minute, this... I probably would have done the same thing. Yeah. I don't feel so bad about it now.
Sure.
So, but in any case, what began to happen then, there's a phrase that was being used in those days was radicalization. People started getting woken up.
Yeah.
Okay. So now I'm a senior in high school. You know, we got first MLK, then JFK, RFK assassinations. Everything's very, very, very tense. We got riots going on all over the place. And I'm getting ready to go off to college. Now, both of my parents had gone to WSU.
Washington State University.
Washington State University. Known here in Seattle as MU, right? Well, it was originally an agricultural school, right?
Yeah.
And if you haven't been there, you're not missing anything. Sorry, Cougars.
Oh, come on now, Chris. That's spoken like a true Husky.
That's right, exactly right. And it's this little town called Pullman, which is 70 miles south of Spokane. And for some reason, I'm not quite sure how, I'd managed to get to be like a junior in high school and never gone to Pullman. Because in those days, the Cougars would play most of their home football games in Spokane at Joe Albi Stadium. So we'd go there to watch the football games, and other than that, there wasn't any real reason to go to Pullman. So anyway, we went on the college tour thing. We get to Pullman, and I'm looking around going, no, really, where is it? Very funny, you drug me out. Okay, yeah, no, really. So I was like, this is not happening. So I chose to go to the UW. Right.
How'd your parents feel about that?
Yeah, they weren't so wild about that, but yeah. But, you know, sorry. And so I arrived here in the fall of 1969.
Okay.
And in the spring of 1970, the whole world erupted, right? We had Kent State, all this kind of stuff. The anti-war movement is getting really big and intense. And, you know, we've got now for us personally, you know, that you guys didn't have to deal with was the draft.
Yeah.
Right? So if you didn't want to get drafted, which was kind of the way it was for most everybody, you had to make sure you stayed in school, et cetera, et cetera. And I had the added joy of my father was chairman of the draft board back in Spokane. Yeah, so it produced two things. One, I constantly had the local media checking up on me.
Yeah.
And then I had scads of new friends that, oh, hey, Maj, oh, it's so good to see you, man. Hey, how are you? How's your dad? Did I tell you I'm a conscientious objector now? Did you know that? It's like, oh, get the
yeah, that's a big list, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, give me a break, you know. So, yeah, I was suddenly.
So, what were your personal feelings about the war now that this craziness has come on and you're seeing this firsthand?
Well, I went from a household where my mom was kind of a quiet Democrat. My dad was a Barry Goldwater Republican. And let's just say that in May of 1970, I was leading marches down freeways.
Okay.
Yes, we took over the campus radio station KUOW, and I was one of the voices of Radio Free Seattle.
Okay.
We barricaded ourselves in there for 6 weeks. So I was definitely one that got radicalized. And, you know, kids asked me, well, were you a hippie? I said, oh, God. Hippies were the ones who lived in the Volkswagen buses and wore tie-dye and made candles and wore Birkenstocks. Okay, no. Right? There was hippies and radicals.
Yeah.
Okay, they didn't actually get along very well. You know, radicals were all about social activism, political activism, and hippies are, you know, peace, love, dope.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was intense. We had, you know, riots on campus. We had a police riot one night. People in Seattle don't like to remember that, but literally, the police were frustrated with all of the protests one night. I don't know what the number of them was, but it was relatively substantial. Came up on campus in plain clothes, and here's how smart they were, carrying their police-issued nightsticks and radios, and just started randomly beating on people.
Oh, man.
Just people walking down the side. They beat professors, girls, didn't matter. You know, and I lived in the SAE house at that point, which was right on the corner there of 17th and 45th. And when our front room became like a triage center, you know, hauling people up there and taking care of split heads and stuff. It was absolutely insane.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And then, you know, it was very strange because, you know, the government was convinced that a revolution was about to happen. So they were trying to find ways, both overt and covert.
Well, I think that might start a revolution. You start beating people.
Yeah, well, that's, you know, that's funny how that works.
Say you want a revolution.
You know, and they literally, the cops tried to kill me one night. That was not so much fun.
Expand on it a little bit. What do you mean, actually, physically?
Yeah, physically. Is there any other way to kill somebody?
Well, I mean, I don't know. It's just...
We didn't have social
media
then, so they weren't going to delete me or anything. So, yeah. Well, we did this little routine for a couple weeks where every night protesters would gather on the Ave and we'd march, and the cops would wait till we got to 50th or whatever, and they'd come out and chase us and throw tear gas, and we'd go the other way, and this would go back and forth, and finally I think everybody's getting a little tired of it. So one night we're marching, the cops are chasing us, only they'd set up a second batch down at the other end, so now we're trapped, right?
Yeah.
And now there's tear gas going all around, that stuff's nasty and so forth. So I, kerchief over my face, run into the alley behind the university bookstore. Just, my eyes are watering and la 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 la. And I'm just kind of there wheezing and kind of gathering my senses. And it's dark, and these headlights pull into the alley. And I'm like, no big deal. All of a sudden there's this, oh shit, the guy's stepping on the gas. And I look, and it's a cop car, and he's coming right at me. And I'm, I got a wall over here. I got a wall over here. The only thing that was there was the dumpster. So I took 3 steps and did a less than elegant dive into the dumpster. And the bumper of the car is scraping the side of the dumpster, right?
Jesus.
So my first thought is, Jesus, what's up with these guys? Can't they see?
Yeah.
And they go blasting down the alley, and I'm thinking, God, so I get out of the dumpster, start walking. Well, they do a U-ey in the middle of 45th and come back the other way. So I'm going, oh, I get it. This is personal. This isn't just some random. Yeah, same thing. Back in the dumpster.
It's a freaking assassination.
More paint scraping. Like, son of a bitch. So this time when they get out there, I bailed out of that dumpster, beat feet. Out the alley, and that was, that raised your blood pressure.
That's crazy.
Yeah, we later came to find they had pictures of all of us who'd been in the radio station because they didn't like what we were doing on the radio station.
Now I know this is a long time ago, but hey, we've got current situations just like that.
Yeah, about that. Yeah.
So it's actually relevant now. Obviously, it's in Seattle. Is that going across the country?
Oh yeah,
campuses.
Yeah, that was literally everywhere.
Yeah.
Kent State sent everything in, just kind of lit the fuse.
What exactly happened in Kent State? I mean, I don't know all the details of Kent State. I'm a young guy.
The Ohio National Guard, which was a bunch of untrained, nervous guys, no different than us in age, got panicky, started shooting, and killed a bunch of unarmed students. There's some classic photos from that episode. So it's like, okay, let me get this straight. So our own National Guard is now murdering unarmed students, right? Because you don't like that we're protesting the war? Yeah, sorry, that's a no-go.
Yeah.
So, you think we were protesting before?
You woke up.
Yeah,
for sure.
Exactly. You just kicked the sleeping giant.
Yeah.
Right in the nuts, to be exact.
I mean, it's hard to. I mean, nowadays we have so much media, you see these things, but it's more visceral when knowing you that you're actually. I could see that. I mean, that would definitely change the way I see the world.
Yeah. Oh, it did.
From my childhood in Spokane, a conservative little town.
Exactly.